Hello, today's lesson is, I'm calling it 2.1a. It's 2.1 in the Big Ideas Math textbook. And we're looking at learning how to multiply fractions and to talk about what it means to multiply fractions. So here's the key idea that you would see in your textbook. And then I have this little box. I'm asking you the question of why can't we have 0 as a denominator? Because this algebra here says that d is in the denominator and it can't be 0. So I want you to think about if I have a class full of 30 students, if I bring in 0 donuts to be divided by my 30 students, how many donuts does everybody get? Well, 0, of course. It's not nice to bring in 0 donuts, but if I did, you would get 0. But then if I turn it around and say, what if I bring 30 donuts to divide between 0 students? Well, what does that even mean, right? So you're looking to try to divide something into piles of 0, which doesn't even make sense. And so we can't have 0 as a denominator because really it doesn't make sense, but also, right, you can't divide by 0. So that's why we can't have 0 in the denominator of a fraction. Doesn't even make sense. Okay, so now let's take a look at some benchmark fractions, right? So if I have this fraction number line from 0 to 1, you can see I have 1/2 here. If I take a half of a half, it's a fourth. So there's another fourth. So this is 1/4. And this would be, if I wanted to keep it in fourths, that would be 2/4. This would be 3/4. And then I could start to change some of these other fractions. I could add in eighths. Eighths are kind of easy because it's right in between the fourths. So this would be 1/8, this would be 2/8, this would be 3/8. So now I have a few fractions that are down below on the number line. Okay, so I want you to think about this. If I'm looking at this fraction 3/8, right? So here it is, it's right here. Is it closer to 0 or closer to 1/2? Well, you can see it's closer than 1/2, so I put it in this box. Now I've got 5/6, which I don't have 6 on my number line, but if you think about if you have a pizza and it's cut into 6, if you eat 5 of those pieces, you've pretty much eaten the whole thing, right? So that would belong in 5/6. Now I've got 1/12, right? 12ths are really small pieces, so it's going to be somewhere down here, and it's going to be close to 0. 8/9, again, I don't have ninths on here, but here's what my eighths look like, and ninths are a little bit smaller than that. So it's probably about right here, right? Close to 1. And then I've got 5/11. I can drag this into the half because I know that if I had 5/10, that would be exactly a half. Now the 1/4 is kind of tricky because it's right here. It's right in between 0 and 1/2. So sometimes what I do is I put it here on the 1/4 and then I say, well, maybe depending on what I'm estimating, maybe I'll put it close to 1/2 or close to 0. And same thing with the 3/4, right? Because the 3/4 is right in between 1/2 and 1. So I could put it here, but then I could also write it in. I could sometimes think of 3/4 as 1/2. Usually we round up though, right? And then the last one is 2/3. So let's pick a different color and try to see if we could get some thirds on here. Okay, so it's about here and here. So if this is 1/3 and this is 2/3, again, it kind of looks like it's in between the 1/2 and the 1. We could use our rounding up rule and just call it 1. Or we could say it's too close to call, and maybe I sometimes might think of it as being closer to a half, but I'd probably just round it up to 1. Okay, so we did some benchmark fractions because we are going to need to estimate today. So here's the lesson for today. When you're multiplying fractions, the meaning of multiplication is you're finding a part of something. Of means times. And so the meaning, I'm going to have you write this in. What is 1/5 of 1/3? That's the question. That's the meaning of multiplying fractions. I've got 1/5 of something, or I start with 1/3 and I take 1/5 of it. Now the estimating goes like this. 1/5 is close to 0 times 1/3. Well, that's kind of close to 0 too. Or maybe I could say it's closer to 1/2. Then I would get 0. Okay, so my estimate is 0. When I multiply those two numbers, it's going to be a small number. You guys are used to multiplying and numbers get larger. And now when we multiply fractions, we're going to see that we're taking a piece of a fraction, right? And so I'm going to start to model the picture to show you what this looks like. I look at the denominator. I see the denominator is 5 and 3. So what I want to do is I want to draw a rectangle that's 5 squares down. So I start at the top and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I go over 1, 2, 3. Now what that did for me is it gave me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. So when I make a fraction that looks like 1/5, I'm going to take a highlighter and I'm going to highlight one row that's 1/5. I'm going to put my fraction here. That's 1/5. And now I'm trying to, so if I have a fifth of a candy bar, that's what it looks like. Now how about if you take a third of that fifth and give it to somebody? I'm going to need to highlight the column. Oops, that is not a highlighter. I'm going to highlight the column like this, right? So that represents 1/3 because there's 3 columns altogether. Now notice, so there's my 1/3. Notice that there's 1 square that has been highlighted with both purple and green. So if I start out with a third of something and I take a fifth of it, it looks like that little tiny piece there, right? There's my third, and then I break up that third into fifths. So the meaning of this multiplication is what we're going to look at. The actual multiplication looks like this. I have 1/5 times 1/3. The number of squares that were highlighted with both colors is what is the product. It's the answer that I get. It's 1 out of, well, how many squares are there total, right? There's 5 times 3, which is 15. So if I started with a fifth of something and then I took a third of it, that leaves me with one little tiny piece that is 1 out of 15. So the actual answer is 1/15. And if you looked at this that I showed you from the textbook, you're basically multiplying across the numerators and multiplying across the denominators. Okay, let's do another example. There's 2 more examples. We're going to do the meaning and then the estimate. I'm going to go ahead and type in the meaning for this one. What is, it's kind of small, I'll make it bigger. What is 1/2 of 5/6? Okay, here's my question. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so there is the meaning and now the estimate, right? So I'm going to estimate, well, 1/2 is literally 1/2, right? So it's 1/2 times, remember 5/6 is almost 1. So whatever answer I get, it should be close to 1/2. Okay, so now I'm going to make the picture with the model, right? Remember, look at my denominators, 2 and 6. So I'm going to start up here and I'm going to make a rectangle that drops down 2 and goes over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is highlight half. So notice I've got 2 rows, so that means I'm highlighting one of the rows because that's what half is. So I highlight this row. That is my fraction 1/2. And then I want to highlight, notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. And the number up here is 5, 6. So I want to highlight 5 out of the 6. Highlighter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice carefully which squares have both colors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, sorry, I should have also wrote in green. This was my 5/6 fraction. All right, so the product, what I have left is when I take half of 5/6 is going to be 5 pieces, but now they're smaller, right? So the actual, I'm going to write it up here just because I've got more room. 1/2 times 5/6 is equal to 5/12. That kind of makes sense, because if I take 5 pieces and I cut them in half, they're going to be 12ths, because I'm taking half of them. Okay, so the actual answer is 5/12. Hey, is 5/12 close to 1/2? Yes, it is, because if I had 6/12, that would be a half, right? 1/2 is equal to 6/12. Okay, let's try the next one. 3/7 times 2/3. You know what I'm going to do for the meaning. I pretty much do this every single time. I'm going to type in, what is 3/7 of 2/3? Question mark. That's the meaning. Trying to figure out what is a fraction of a fraction. And now when I estimate 3/7, well, that's pretty close to 1/2, because 3 1/2 out of 7 would be 1/2. So it's close to 1/2. And then the 2/3, right, I'm using the round up to 1, so 1/2 times 1. This also should be about 1/2. Okay, so I'm going to look at the denominators, and I'm going to draw my rectangle now, the number of squares in the denominator, because I know I need to have 7ths and 3rds. So I'm going to start here and drop down 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I don't have enough room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me just add another little row. Okay, so I've got 7, and then I'm going to go over 3, because that's the other denominator. So let's make this a different color. So here we go. 7 and 3. So there's my rectangle. Now notice I've got 7 rows, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I need to highlight 3 of them, right? That's how I show 3/7. So let's get the highlighter, and let's do, I usually highlight from the bottom. I don't know why, it's just my habit. So there's 1, 2, there's 3 rows of 7ths. There's my 3/7, and now I need to do the columns, and I need to highlight 2 out of those columns, 2 out of the 3 columns. So here, oops, highlighter, let's get a different color. Let's pick this kind of a purpley. Okay, so I got 1, 2. Now you can see that this is my 2/3. Okay, so how many squares are highlighted with both colors? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when I multiply the fractions, I end up with 6 out of 21. Now technically, this fraction needs to be simplified, right? And remember, when you simplify fractions, you're looking to divide out by a common denominator. So I end up with 2/7. If you can get to this part of the problem, we can practice simplifying some more. I'm fine with you leaving it for now as 6/21, but I want you to know that we will continue to practice simplifying. And this answer helps you see that there are 6 squares out of 21. But that is equivalent to 2/7. Okay, now I've got to show you one more thing. All right, now you're looking at my Canvas page, right? So there it is. There's the homework. And I want to show you, there's a picture of what we did, drawing the fractions. Now, when you click this link, there's an app called GeoGebra, and it's super cool. And I want to show you one of the fractions that we already made. I'm going to move this window over a little bit. Let's see if it'll let me move it while I'm already in it. Nope, that's okay. Okay, I'm going to move this down. There we go. Okay, so with this GeoGebra, what I can do is I can use this little slider, and I can create different fractions. So the second OYO that you guys had was 1/2. So I just made a fraction that's 1/2, and then it was times 5/6. So I can change the denominator and then the numerator with these sliders, and then I grab the pink button and I slide them over. Whoa, it's so cool. So now I can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 12 squares that have both colors. So you can play around with this on the homework. If you need help, you can create the fractions with GeoGebra. It doesn't have mixed numbers. It's just proper fractions less than 1. So the last example that we just did, the OYO, was 3/7. So I'm going to change the denominator to 7 and then change the numerator to 3. and then this was 2/3. And so now I have what's 3/7 of 2/3. And when I slide it over, you can see that it turns out to be 6/21. So super cool. It's linked in Canvas, or if you just Google GeoGebra multiplying fractions, you can find it there. Okay, that's it. The homework is just like the notes. Good luck.